There you go. I hope you can see my screen. So again, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to your virtual conference space. While our distinguished representatives and guests and attendees are quickly filling up the room, I have a quick technical announcement to make sure your meeting runs as smoothly as possible. Without further ado, our Zoom meeting guidelines for today. We kindly remind all presenters and panelists to please use a headset or an earphone with an integrated microphone whenever possible. Headset and earphones are recommended to make sure your message is heard clearly by all attendees, but also by your interpreters working behind the scenes. We recommend all participants to use Zoom Desktop app and update their app to the latest version, especially if they are experiencing any technical issues. The most important thing in any meeting, your microphone. On Zoom, the microphone is located in the bottom left corner of your screen. Please click on the little arrow on the right of the microphone icon to check or change your settings and make sure your device, that is the microphone that you will be using during the meeting, is correctly recognized and picked up by Zoom. The raise hand feature. During any interactive session, your meeting coordinator or moderators may invite you to take the floor and contribute. Please do so by clicking on the little hand that is found in the bottom center of your screen to signal you're ready and willing to take the floor. Interpretation. For today's meeting, we have simultaneous interpreting available from and into English, French, and Spanish. A team of professional conference interpreters is ready behind the scenes. Interpretation will start as soon as your session officially kicks off. So please wait until the start of the meeting to select your preferred language channel by clicking on the globe icon right here. Technical support for each and every technical glitches, do not hesitate to send us a message directly via the chat. Your main support contacts today are Nathan for interpretation support and me, Alice. All technical operators are always easy to find. Just type support in the participant list and you will quickly locate us. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us anytime. On behalf of the Master Voice support team, thank you so much for your attention. We wish you all a very pleasant meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alice. I'm Jonathan Prentice, the head of the Secretariat for the United Nations Network on Migration, and it's a real pleasure to open this final session of our annual meeting when the UN system, stakeholders and member states will focus on the road to the IMRF, now some 5 months away. We have a busy agenda and I am thrilled, really pleased that Robert Piper, the Assistant Secretary General for Development Coordination, and Susanna Jakob, the Deputy Director General of the World Health Organization, can kick proceedings off with some opening comments. So if I could ask Dr. Jakob to the virtual floor, I would be very grateful.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, dear Robert Piper, it is a real pleasure for me to be with you today for this last session of the third annual meeting of the UN Network on Migration. 3 years ago, we had a really historic moment. The adoption of the Global Compact for Migration, the UN Global Agreement on a common approach to international migration in all its dimensions. We especially value the recognition that a cooperative approach is needed to enhance the overall benefits of migration, and the shared responsibility and commitment to working together to face common migration challenges for individuals and communities in countries of origin, transit, and destination is pivotal. Almost 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, health systems remain overwhelmed. People are missing essential life-saving health services. Children have missed out immunizations and months of education. Millions have been rushed into poverty. The global economy is still suffering. International human mobility has been drastically reduced. with border closures and travel restrictions of unprecedented scale. We cannot forget that in the past, the public health implications of migration have been widely considered as so-called side effect of population mobility, requiring ad hoc health interventions when needed. The necessary public health perspective has been sometimes lost or subordinated to law enforcement considerations. The interdependencies between migration and health have become accentuated in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Consequently, health, which was previously a neglected topic in migration governance debates, has become central. Combining migration and health to achieve positive health outcome remains both a challenge and an obligation, not only for public health policymakers and practitioners, but also reaching beyond traditional counterparts in the health sector, including foreign policy, economics, finance, and internal affairs. The International Migration Review Forum is the moment to discuss and share progress on the implementation of all aspects of the Global Compact of Migration, including as it relates to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We must take the opportunity to learn from the past 3 years. We must prioritize dissemination of progress, and we must reflect on the monitoring process and bring consistent indicators to the table. Looking ahead to the International Migration Review Forum, we must create scope for action that goes beyond the realization of the individual objectives of the GCM. We must promote a 360-degree approach of the GCM. The IMRF must be a window of opportunity and a moment to catalyze action, and health must be a fundamental part of it. We are learning the paramount changes occurring on the ground in migration policies and actions during the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, there was a wide range of regularizations so that migrants could have access to healthcare. Many of these solutions were temporary. We need to recognize the ones that were successful and make them permanent. We need all stakeholders to participate fully in this process. Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic is a powerful demonstration that when health is at risk, everything is at risk. Just last week, WHO member states at the special session of the World Health Assembly decided to establish an intergovernmental body to draft and negotiate a WHO convention, agreement, or other international instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. This is an important step to strengthen the architecture of global health security, to strengthen WHO, to strengthen the commitment to supporting the realization of the right to health and the right to health for all. WHO will continue to work with partners to support countries to protect and promote the right to health for all people, including migrants and refugees. No public health without migrant health. We will continue to drive energy around the Global Compact for Migration towards a healthier, fairer, and safer world. I wish you a great session today, and I thank you, and back to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much indeed, Susanna, for those opening comments, indeed, on, I think, one of the critical issues we're all facing, and particularly in this field. It's a great pleasure now to introduce Robert Piper to you. As I said, he heads the Office for Development Coordination in the United Nations in New York. Robert, please.
Thank you, Jonathan, and Excellencies, Dr. Jacob, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you this morning and to participate in this discussion and to focus on the greater engagement of the RC system in support of the UN network work on migration. I'm here also to learn, and I'm looking forward to listening to some of the presentations that will follow, and particularly happy that our resident coordinator in Ecuador, Lina Savelli, is also here, and she will be speaking in very concretely to what she has done in Ecuador with the country team on this absolutely critical issue. Let me also take the opportunity to really recognize DG Vitorino for his leadership and his guidance for this network. It's no small feat. Migration is yet another issue that illustrates the importance of UN system coherence. It touches every aspect of our work, from the humanitarian to the developmental, and within the development side of the house as well, almost every agency has something to contribute. And in this sense, DG Vitorino is a global resident coordinator on the issue of migration. The network is, if you will, a global country team, a global team that brings all of the assets together to tackle this absolutely critical issue. And I'm sure Antonio can see the extraordinary promise when we can harness all of the UN's assets behind this issue. And there's some of the challenges that come with trying to achieve that. And so I really do want to give him my support and our credit for what he has achieved so far. Migrants are also a very key group for us to monitor and support as we aspire to the famous SDG leitmotif of leaving no one behind. I think Susanna said it much more eloquently than I could. The precariousness of the migrant situation in the aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis really did kind of illustrate what many of us knew before, was how absolutely precarious so many migrants, the existence, how precarious the existence is of so many migrants on the move, away from home, often unable to access local services, and too often, way too often, overlooked by national policies and national programs. It's fortunate in many ways that the inception of the UN network on migration coincided with this effort to reform the UN development system to create more empowered and independent resident coordinators leading UN country teams. And these reforms were driven precisely by the need for the UN development system to be able to respond much, much better to these types of horizontal issues that are the priorities of the 21st century. Horizontal issues, complex issues, multi-dimensional issues that require, as I said, every part of the UN system to join the effort. And so since the launch of the network, I do feel that resident coordinators have really strengthened their engagement on this issue. Because if it requires all of UN response, then by definition, it's a priority for our new generation of resident coordinators. They are precisely here for these types of issues. They have responded. First, I've seen resident coordinators ensuring that the migration issue becomes a standard focus in their common country analysis, in their cooperation frameworks around which they program. We've gathered data at DCO, and we've seen that the majority of cooperation frameworks in migrant hosting countries now include a fairly solid component on migrants. For example, in Mexico, the cooperation framework identifies migrants and refugees as part of all of the four program country priorities in the cooperation framework. Migrants are considered in all of the development strategies, in all of the results areas. In Armenia, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Georgia, in Morocco, in Thailand, in Ukraine, RCs have supported the UN network in promoting the issue of migration and ensuring that it is systematically embedded into our cooperation frameworks, but also and supporting the discussions around the Global Compact on Migration and linking that to the 2030 agenda. Second, we've seen a number of resident coordinators and with the support often of our regional DCO officers, in helping set up the nearly 60 national or regional networks for migration to support member states in implementing the compact. In Uzbekistan, for example, the UN Migration Network is one of the cutting thematic groups under our cooperation framework. And its role is to mainstream migration issues into the work of the UN country team and develop a joint sub-regional program to support the global compact on migration. In Maldives, thanks to RC leadership, the UN interagency collaboration has enabled the network to generate support from government and civil society stakeholders to focus on human trafficking and, of course, on the compact. Third, resident coordinators are doing their best to highlight the impact of COVID-19 and the impact of conflict as well on the movement of migrants. As I said, Susanna touched on that. Our team in Djibouti, in Kenya, and Somalia have been quite strong in making sure that the COVID-19 aspect of on migrants is not overlooked. In the Philippines, I'm told the RC has been convening the network and obtained very strong government support and commitment on migration and has been very active in doing joint assessments on the impact of COVID-19 as well as climate change on this issue. So in short, I'm here to underline the fact that the RC system is absolutely committed to supporting IOM and member states as we enter this critical period for the Global Compact moving towards the forum next year. The IOM Director General and Network Coordinator, of course, Antonio Vitorino, and I wrote jointly to resident coordinators just a few weeks ago to ensure that that it is on their radar, the preparation for the review forum, and that they make it a priority, that they mobilize the stakeholders required to make sure that this is a success. Under the leadership of the resident coordinator, the UN network and country teams are committed to supporting member states in this process, as I'm sure you've heard during the course of this week, supporting governments in the development of their voluntary national reviews, supporting the consultative process to make sure that these reviews really bring in all of the relevant stakeholders, and expanding the partnership of the UN network so that we have lots of evidence of great practice, so that we have every member of society that has something to contribute, playing their part to support this issue. So I'm very much, again, to close, looking forward to supporting the UN network on migration and member states in our collective efforts in the weeks and months ahead. You can count on the resident coordinator system. You can count on us making sure that this issue is a priority for the system and that migrants are an integral part of our concerns as we ensure that no one is left behind on the road to 2030. So thank you very much, Jonathan, for the invitation. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Robert, for accepting it. It was really great to hear from you. And I would also like to reciprocate the thanks from the network to the entire development coordination system. You have a heavy lift on your hands, to say the least, all of you, and you've handled this additional burden that the network has presented with real collegiality. We are extremely grateful for that. I will now turn to the panel discussion. We have quite a slate of speakers because we would like to have quite a range of differing perspectives to kickstart the conversations. That does mean, however, that I'm going to have to ask for some time discipline. I am a terribly timid chair. I hate to interrupt people when they are in mid-flow. So please treat charitably this appeal from me to be as crisp and concise as possible so that we can then move on to questions, answers, interventions from the many colleagues and who are listening in virtually. So to kickstart this session, I will call upon the rapporteurs who participated in the network's own internal discussions over the past day and a half. And if I could call to the virtual floor, Monica Perufo from UNDP and Christian Wolfe from the ACT Alliance to give a brief overview of the discussions that we have just had. Please, Monica and Christian. Monica, will you go first, or Christian?
Yes,
I don't know.
Monica first.
Okay, great. Please.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Yesterday, there were extremely rich and diverse presentation and contributions, so I hope to do justice to the point presented. So what have been the key achievements of the network in the last year? This was one of the guiding questions of yesterday morning discussion. The members recognize that thanks to the close collaboration among the network members, the network strengthened advocacy by producing joint messages on key issues, leading to more consistency in messaging across UN agencies. We've also witnessed the network supporting a broad participation of governments and stakeholders in the GCM review at local, national, and regional levels. Almost 100 countries submitted GCM voluntary reports, and the regional reviews have been the first opportunity for a formal review of the GCM, engaging a diverse set of actors. To support the implementation of the GCM with specific tools, the global training curriculum for the UN country team has been finalized and can be adapted to the national context of the country wishing to use it. Equally, the GCM implementation guidance for governments and all relevant stakeholders is ready, and the Migration Network Hub started its activities, launching recently its repository of practices. And here goes a special request to member states and network partners. Please submit practices to the hub and use the discussion spaces as part of the Imrf preparations. And perhaps one of the major achievements widely recognized by all members has been overall the development of a structure and infrastructure, an architecture and mechanism that are now in place. The development and rolling out of robust terms of reference at the global level and increasingly also at the regional level. There are also been good progresses also in the establishment of national networks. What remains to be done? What next now? Even if progress has been achieved, a remaining challenge is the need to strengthen support from the UN network to the country level. Moving now to the focus to the actual GCM implementation with national counterparts. All agencies need to be involved and take leadership in this endeavor. Now that the network structure is in place, there is a need to refine our engagement with each other, and it's time to go beyond producing high-level tools, as useful as they are, to the design of modality to co-create synergies and community of practice, particularly at regional and national level. There were three major issues that need to be emerged that yesterday discussion noted. The first is, while we have seen the networks growing and maturing, we have also witnessed in parallel a decrease of engagement from some states with a no risk-taking attitude during the COVID-19 pandemic. A suggested response can be to stimulate a range of different types of engagement from states, not only as GCM champions, but stressing their support to specific issues, approach, or practices. In this line, the pledging towards the Imrf is one of the ways this engagement can be tested and demonstrated. Second, despite the wide reach out of the network, there is still work to do in ensuring inclusivity. These regard particularly involvement and engagement of local actors, of private sector, youth, and migrants themselves in the lead up both to the Imrf and also in the GCM implementation. These bring also the question how we improve our reach out methods to ensure to bring more diversity around the table. How do we listen to crucial stakeholders in the region and in the country? That is a big question. Third, there is a need to build bridges between the GCM and the GCR to see how they overlap and interact, to reflect on the importance of protection for both migrants and refugees, and to avoid the division and the use of rigid categorization. There is undoubtedly hesitation on the protection of migrants. However, we need to reflect how to close the protection gaps. So what are the next steps and the way forward? The big proposal from yesterday was that definitely the network should go even more local. It was noted that migrants don't settle in country, they settle in cities and municipalities. That means that our local actors, those providing infrastructure and services to the migrants. And therefore, we need an enhanced role of local government and city in the implementation of the GCM. Equally, the private sector needs to be included more systematically. they often have a leverage towards the government that civil society and international organizations don't have. And a last point is media and journalists. The public opinion must be stimulated not only about problems related to migration, but also about the contribution of migrants to the country of origin, transit, and destination. Last but not least, migrant voices should be included in all conversations so that policy can have a real impact. We should be intentional in opening co-created spaces, reflect who is at the table, and if the entry mechanism of that table do offer meaningful representation, and to listen and incorporate the voices and proposals of the affected communities. We need to reflect about the barriers to access the communication within the network, because the whole of the UN system is there, but not all of society is there yet. Some practical proposals that emerged yesterday were the addition of 2 more specific sessions in the Imrf for listening to civil society. One proposal was on diaspora representation, and the second on civil society self-organizing. The growth of the list of champion countries to include more destination countries, to assess the needs and the possibility through a survey to allow a mapping of the national network to see how they operate, how they engage or not with their government, civil society and other stakeholders. And finally, also quite important, to mobilize further the residence coordinator offices in the lead up to the Imrf. I'm sure that more issue can be brought up, but this was an initial summary, and now I let the floor to Christian to complement it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Monica, and allow me to take over and try to characterize the afternoon sessions yesterday, which focused on the theme of identifying emerging priorities for the network. Discussion was grouped around 2 panels with a wide variety of speakers, and there was active participation from the floor as well. The dominant topic of conversation were the impacts of climate change on human mobility and how these should best be addressed. So I will focus on this primarily here. But before I do, I would like to also mention several other themes that came out strongly in our discussion as emerging priorities that the network and its stakeholders should focus on as well. The first of these, quite obviously, and it was mentioned in our introduction already as well, were the impacts of COVID on migrants, ranging from restricted access to health and related services. Currently, a lot of this is focused on the discussion on vaccines, to access to social protection, job security, and decent work. And often, these problems highlighted pre-existing structural inequalities that particularly affect migrants and especially migrant women. The right to seek asylum was also severely restricted during the pandemic, as was pointed out by participants. And on the positive side, we did see, as people mentioned, several initiatives to counter migrant exclusion, for example, through efforts to document undocumented migrants, including through regularization and community-based capacity building work. The need to increase regular pathways and promote regularization was mentioned several times. The lack of such pathways was highlighted as a major source of vulnerabilities for migrants, and the importance of learning from existing pathway models, either bilaterally or regionally, such as in East Africa, for example, was emphasized. And we heard about that a little bit this morning in relation to climate as well. With regard to regularization in particular, participants mentioned that this is both a pre-existing priority, with many examples of regularization from different countries, although it was also said that we still need more documentation on this. We need to look into this a bit more systematically. At the moment, there's a bit of research that's been done on this in Europe and in Latin America, but it would be good to know if others are looking at this and if this could be prioritized as an area of work going forward. And then also regularization came as a new priority in a sense, elevated by COVID, because the responses from states showed pretty much that it was, when there was political will, it was quite simple in a lot of cases to implement these programs, and immigration systems didn't collapse. So on the positive side, it showed also what's possible when states put their minds to it. On xenophobia and on the role of racial discrimination in marginalizing migrants, several speakers noted that this is still not at the priority level that it should be. And it was woven into a discussion of the need for new narratives. This was also mentioned this morning by the Philippines in relation to climate migration, for example. The role of technology and digitalization was raised as both potentially positive aspect in that it can lead to greater connectedness and information sharing, and as a negative aspect through the incitement and spreading of hate against migrants. And finally, the need to broaden the inclusion of more actors, for example, local authorities, where we heard good examples from Kenya, and the migrant diaspora was also brought into the discussion. Now, on climate change specifically, the majority of speakers chose to address the impacts of climate change on human mobility in a variety of ways. And this connection is really an emerging issue only in the sense that it now seems to have gained much broader attention among the network stakeholders and collaborators, as well as a broader range of institutions. Climate change, of course, as you remember, has been discussed since the beginning of the GCM process during the consultations in 2017, and then during the negotiations leading to what many think is quite a progressive text on this. But after the adoption of the compact, there appeared to have been a slight dip in attention when the first slate of network working groups did not explicitly focus on this topic, which has now been addressed through the new work stream that was also talked about yesterday. Several participants mentioned the increasing role of climate change as a push factor for migratory movements, especially in slow onset scenarios, as well as the humanitarian and human rights implications of failing to address this phenomenon in a broad and holistic way. For example, and connected to some of the discussions in the first session, there was a shared assessment that we need to transition from the old regime that separated refugee and migration issues towards building new approaches and linking policies. It was emphasized in this context that climate change will be altering the conditions of human mobility, and that this needs to be addressed regardless of people's motivation for their movement. There was an acknowledgement that this discussion has now entered or moved from a primarily technical to a higher political realm in the international deliberations as well, and that this is both an opportunity and a challenge, because we now have created more awareness for this topic and decision makers are primed to interact with it. But we can also at the same time not keep repeating only a base message of that this is an issue, but we need to move towards more in-depth analysis of scenarios and developing concrete policy options. Now, as opportunities in this field, this points towards 2022 being a key year for engagement, both through the UN network and through other mechanisms, including the UNFCCC. The concrete processes that were named in this regard were, of course, the Imrf itself, by actively using the roundtable framing of climate issues during the preparations and the review itself. And on the climate side, the dialogue on loss and damage by way of the expert groups under the Warsaw International Mechanism, the work program on the global goal and adaptation, the global stocktake process, as well as next year's voluntary reporting and the joint review at the high-level political forum for the 2030 agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both Monica and Christian, for that overview of discussions. I would now like to turn to government representatives coming from two champion countries, two GCM champion countries. And if I could turn first, please, to Mr. Godwin Amonzem of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration of Ghana. Sir, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for the opportunity. It is my pleasure to join this important meeting of the UN Network on Migration and to deliver Ghana's statement. Permit me to make a comment on the GCM at the onset of the delivery. Ghana views the comprehensive approach adopted by the Global Compact on Migration not only as an opportunity to identify and address the multiplicity of issues bordering on safe, orderly, and regular movement of migrants, but more importantly, as an opportunity to foster meaningful interaction among all stakeholders in the formulation and execution of migration policies, plans, and programs. In order to address the bottlenecks on migration and to align with global trends on migration, Ghana has instituted and adopted a number of policies and programs in the past few years. Notable among them is the creation of a national migration policy in 2016, following from which all migration-related ministries, departments, and agencies of government have yearly sectoral migration work plans for implementation. The implementation of the current sectoral work plans is underway and review is scheduled for the first quarter of 2022. Ghana has other migration-related policies like the National Diaspora Engagement Policy, which is currently before Cabinet. If approved, this policy will be implemented in conjunction with the Homeland Return Bill, also awaiting Cabinet approval. In an attempt, these two will attempt to reverse the migration flow from the north to the south. Other initiatives being developed and or being implemented by the government of Ghana include the creation of a multi-sectoral platform for all migration desk officers to foster a quicker dissemination of information for rapid deployment and for sharing of data. Creation of a national data bank on migration statistics. Creation of a national commission on migration, which will foster greater autonomy in migration governance. Development of a labor migration information system and periodic publication of the national migration profile. Building the capacity of our border control officers to minimize human trafficking and to ensure safe, orderly, and regular migration, as well as to curb the incidence of smuggling and prevention of extremism. Ghana is also entering into memoranda of understanding and agreements with some states. And I would want to mention the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar for the regulation and protection of migrant manpower. I am happy to inform this August forum that Ghana's migration policies are all in tandem with international protocols, conventions, and agreements on migration-related issues. At this juncture, permit me to acknowledge and express the gratitude of the government of Ghana to the International Organization for Migration, especially the organization's office in Accra, Ghana, the German and other European governments, as well as the country's development partners for their immense assistance in developing these migration-related policies and programs. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Ghana is fully committed to the ideals of the Global Compact on Migration and the firm belief that an effective implementation of the compact will bring huge socio-economic benefits to member countries. Ghana is therefore willing and ready to champion and advocate for adherence to the 23 objectives of the compact. In addition, Ghana is hopeful that the multi-partner trust fund will receive the needed support envisaged by the compact for the successful implementation of the objectives of the compact. As we all know, funding deficits remain the biggest challenge to the effective implementation of initiatives. While expressing its gratitude to member states for selecting Ghana to the steering committee of the multi-partner trust fund, my country will remain a committed advocate for the trust fund because its central role in the implementation of the compact. Finally, Ghana is eagerly looking forward to the first International Migration Review Forum, which surely will create an enabling environment for the sharing of experiences and the exchange of ideas towards the effective implementation and administration of migration governance. As we are all aware, human mobility generates social, financial, human, and cultural capital, which impacts positively on development. I thank you for the opportunity to make this intervention on behalf of my country, Ghana, at this important forum. Thank you so much.
The thanks is ours, Mr. Amonzem, for that excellent intervention. Much appreciated. If I can turn now, please, to Cindy Monroe of the Permanent Mission of Canada to the United Nations in Geneva. Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jonathan, for including Canada in this panel. Thank you also to the other speakers on the panel for providing such helpful summaries of your earlier discussions and your views on where we go from here. This discussion is timely and supports member states in our preparations for the International Migration Review Forum. Canada continues to believe that the GCM can make migration work for all by helping states to address the challenges that irregular migration can bring, while also providing an opportunity to harness the contributions of newcomers and ensure their successful integration in new countries. Canada recognizes the significance of the IMRF and the value that it will bring to the international community to come together and to take stock of progress made, and also of the limitations to the implementation of the GCM over the past 4 years in order to recommend areas to concentrate future efforts. As I'm sure is the case for many of you, we are seized with planning for the IMRF. Canada has been preparing an update to the written input submitted in the regional review process last year, highlighting key new initiatives that have supported GCM implementation at home and abroad, in addition to forthcoming plans. Canada is also considering engaging with a targeted group of migration experts to inform our participation in the review and to hear from them on our migration system and our international engagement going forward. We would also like to note that a hybrid format to the IMRF may allow for a more diverse set of voices to be brought forward at the review, and thus further encourage a whole of society and inclusive approach. While on the subject of inclusion, and I would also like to reiterate that we see the IMRF as an opportunity to focus on gender responsive migration management as a GCM principle that requires further concentrated efforts. And while we each look at our own contributions to the GCM as individual member states or members of the UN Network on Migration, we'd like to draw your attention to a couple of initiatives through which we can deliver results collectively between now and the IMRF. The first is the IRIS Global Policy Network on Recruitment, which presents member states with the opportunity to advance their commitments related to Objective 6 of the GCM on fair and ethical recruitment and broader protections for migrant workers. The network currently brings together more than 40 public authorities from around the world to address common challenges and showcase good practices related to recruitment regulation and migrant worker protection. It covers issues such as recruitment fees and costs, licensing of labor recruiters, and the roles of labor attaches and inspection authorities. In the first quarter of 2022, Canada will partner with the IOM and other member states to hold a virtual session introducing the Global Policy Network on Recruitment to member agencies of the UN Network on Migration, and we hope that you will join us for that discussion. We also encourage member states to look at how this network can help you achieve your own GCM commitments in these areas. Canada also sees considerable potential to continue efforts to concretely support GCM implementation through initiatives like the It Takes a Community global social media campaign, which aims to foster more balanced narratives on migration. This contributes to the achievement of Objective 17 of the GCM. At its midpoint assessment, the campaign showed promise. In a relatively short time frame, which is March to July 2021, the campaign's unique multi-stakeholder model generated an impressive 6.4 million social media impressions. We know that it takes a community to maximize migration. It also takes a community, an international community in this case, to maximize the impact of a global communications campaign. So as we look ahead to the IMRF, we'd like to encourage fellow member states to join this global initiative by concretely contributing to the campaign in 2022 and to change the narrative on migration globally. We thank the network for their efforts to ensure that the IMRF provides an environment where states can have productive exchanges with each other and with key stakeholders around best practices in migration management. Canada's migration system is in a constant state of evolution, and the GCM remains a valuable framework for considering how we can seize migration opportunities while confronting the challenges posed by irregular migration. I'll close today by recognizing that December 18th is International Migrants Day. I hope we can all take a moment to think of the very populations we seek to help through our efforts, who are migrants, and especially those in situations of vulnerability. When countries can work together to create safe and regular pathways, we can safeguard migrants' rights, and host countries can benefit from their presence. Let's keep this front of mind as we plan for the IMRF. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Cindy, both for updating on Canada's preparations for the forum and presenting us with a range of ideas that we can take forward collectively towards May. Now, as foreshadowed by Robert, we are thrilled to have with us today Ms. Lena Savelli, the resident coordinator of the United Nations system in Ecuador. Lena, please, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and greetings to Robert, Cindy, all the panelists here. I'm really happy to be here and to be able to contribute to the reflections of the network support to member states for the International Migration Review Forum. I have to say that the network is of great value to countries like Ecuador. As you know, Ecuador is one of the champion countries for the implementation of the Global Compact on Migration. Given the government's commitment and the progress made here on migration regulatory frameworks and public policy, which really do provide for the principle of universal citizenship. Maybe just some facts on Ecuador, for those not familiar with the context. Migration is indeed a key issue. The country is both the country of origin, transit, and destination of migrants. It's one of the main receivers of migrants and refugees from Venezuela right now, hosting over 500,000 people, which is the third highest number in the region after Colombia and Peru. But if you break it down by capita, actually Ecuador has the highest rates of migrants and refugees from Venezuela. And this population has been, of course, disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. The pandemic has hit Ecuador hard. And it was a population that was quite vulnerable already before the pandemic and had serious challenges in accessing livelihood opportunities. Can you hear me? Sorry, it looks like it's frozen the screen.
I can hear you loud and clear, Lena, but it has frozen. Oh, you're moving again. I think it's good now.
Oh,
but the sound was okay.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, and I think that there's also a need here to get a better understanding of what Monica touched upon, which is the issue of the social, cultural, and economic contribution of migrants and refugees to Ecuador. And this, of course, is needed also to combat concerns of xenophobia and racism against migrant communities. Ecuador also receives returning migrants and has put important measures in place to respond to the needs of Ecuadorian nationals abroad. In fact, there is a growing trend of Ecuadorian nationals who migrate through irregular pathways. Some have been reported to have fallen victims to migrant smuggling, according to information gathered by the IOM team here in Quito. So it's really essential to commit to the implementation of the Global Compact for safe and orderly and regular migration to ensure these challenges and also sustainable solutions with a comprehensive approach. And one such positive approach, which has been mentioned by several of the speakers, is, of course, regularization. And we welcome Ecuador's decision to embark on a regularization process for Venezuelan migrants in the country. It was a campaign promise by the president who came into office in May 21. As the UN country team, we have been advocating jointly to facilitate the decision by the president, and we're actively supporting also the registration process and the regularization process. But of course, we need to support Ecuador also more, including on the issue of socioeconomic integration after the registration and the regularization has been done. Christian talked about the issue of having access to social services, protection, and that we need to support the government with. I want to mention the support we've received from Canada. We're working hand in hand with Canada, really on advocating with the government and helping them advance on this important process of regularization. Some other things we're doing as a country team. We're very committed to supporting the government in the implementation of the GCM. We have just created the local UN Migration National Network, composed of several agencies of the system, of course, with the lead of IOM and myself. The team from IOM here has really been proactive in working to establish the national network and has engaged with the government to provide technical assistance for the alignment of the National Development Plan that was just prepared with the 23 objectives of the GCM and of course the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals that feed into the regional review for the implementation of the GCM. They've also updated the regional review and advocated actively for this holistic approach and a meaningful participation also of civil society, partnerships with private sector and academia to integrate these issues. Robert touched on the CCA process, the Common Country Assessments, which we're currently reviewing here in Ecuador. We need to prepare a new framework next year. And in our initial discussions, it's really clear how much the issue of migration needs to be featured in the work of the UN, even more so than it did 4 years ago. And we do have migration as a cross-cutting issue in all the conversations. We'll also have conversations, consultations with the right holders themselves, migrants and refugees. A point on data, we're also supporting the government right now with a national census next year. So we're working with them to ensure that the formulario, the survey and the methodology adequately captures the migrant population so that we can take into account this population and identify what their needs are. Today is International Human Rights Day, so I have to, of course, mention the importance of positioning migrant rights as human rights. And we have begun working with the National Human Rights Institution and human rights defenders on that point as well. I meet with them every 3 months, and migrant issues are included in the conversation. So we really do remain committed as a country team. We received a joint letter sent by Robert and Antonio, and we'll ensure that we follow up on it and integrate it. I do see that the local group that we're setting up is really a helpful space for strengthening advocacy, facilitating discussions on sustainable solutions, partnerships, including on linkages between migration and other issues like climate change, as was mentioned by some of the panelists. And this is in complement to the more operational work on migrants and refugees that's being done within the group on migrants and refugees co-led by UNHCR and IOM here in the region. So do trust that the country team in Ecuador is fully active on this issue. It's cross-cutting in all our work, and we do remain very, very committed because it's a real concern here, and we need to ensure these sustainable solutions for this big population of migrants that we have here, but also migrants that are leaving Ecuador or passing through. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lena, for that perspective from the UN country team in Ecuador. Hugely appreciated. I am now going to turn to Mr. Bella Hovey of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs in the UN Secretariat and a member of the Network Executive Committee. It's a great pleasure, Bella, to welcome you.
It's also a pleasure to be here, Jonathan. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, esteemed colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The Department of Economic and Social Affairs has supported intergovernmental processes on migration in the General Assembly for decades. In the few minutes that I have, I will briefly focus on 3 questions. First, what are the main entry points for country-level participation in the IMRF? Second, what other opportunities exist for advancing the global migration agenda? 3, how do we measure progress in implementing the Global Compact? First, let's look at the main entry points. The Progress Declaration, to be adopted at the IMRF, will be the main outcome of the forum. I encourage all member states, through their permanent missions in New York, to participate actively in the negotiations, which will start at least 2 months ahead of the forum. In case some of the consultations will be held online, capitals can also engage. I also encourage civil society to benefit from the informal hearings on the Progress Declaration, which the co-facilitators are expected to hold. As to the forum itself, member states are encouraged to participate at the highest possible political level. The formal GA plenary, the roundtables, and the policy debate will give ample opportunity for engagement for member states and stakeholders. And as mentioned by Canada, a hybrid format will offer added opportunity for global participation. Dear colleagues, the IMRF can only be a success if we prepare ourselves well. And let me give 3 opportunities. In January and February, the network will hold 4 multi-stakeholder webinars, 1 for each roundtable. These webinars, which will bring together a variety of experts, will provide the kick-off moment for member states and stakeholders to start preparing for the roundtables. Then, on the 9th of May, the President of the General Assembly will hold informal, interactive, multi-stakeholder hearings. This will be the primary opportunity to present and take note of the priorities of civil society. And third, last but not least, at the national level. And I hope that countries will hold national consultations prior to the IMRF based on a whole of government and a whole of society approach as stipulated by the Compact. Now, let us look at other opportunities that exist for advancing the global migration agenda. And here let us remind ourselves that the Global Compact is an elaboration of the 2030 agenda in the field of migration, reflecting the inherent linkages between migration and development. There is no migration without development impacts, and there is no development without migration impacts. As such, the entire governance framework of the 2030 agenda serves as a vehicle to promote the implementation of the Global Compact, including the ministerial declaration adopted at the high-level political forum on sustainable development each year, to the voluntary national reviews countries are preparing and presenting at the HLPF, as also mentioned by our rapporteur Christian, and 3, the regional fora on sustainable development organized by the UN regional commissions. Last but not least, let's talk about measuring progress. And Ghana and Lena spoke already about this key area. As you are aware, the Global Compact has a weak system of accountability. This poses the question, how do we keep track of progress in implementation? Again, the 2030 agenda offers a solution. Countries and the international community have already put in place systems to monitor the sustainable development goals and targets, and they've also agreed on an indicator framework. This is why there is no separate monitoring framework for the Global Compact. Let us look at the sustainable development goals, targets, and indicators that are most relevant for migrants and migration, and use those to assess progress in implementing the Global Compact. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Bella. I would now like to turn to, last but not least, Stella Opoku-Owusu of the African Foundation for Development, to give her comments and insights on the road to the IMRF before we open it up for comments, questions, and a general discussion. Stella, it's great to see you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Good to see you as well. Thanks very much for this opportunity to speak at this annual meeting and to also reflect and highlight some key points in preparation for the IMRF in 2022. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, like many civil society organizations, AFFORD welcomed the GCM and also contributed significantly to its development, in particular on Objective 19, which is focused on creating conditions for migrants and diasporas to fully contribute to sustainable development in all countries. Almost 4 years on since its endorsement, as a diaspora-led organization ourselves with a mission to enhance and expand the diaspora's contribution to development in Africa, we reflect on the progress made. There is a lot more to be done, especially in these uncertain times. Based on the commitment of this objective, to what extent have migrants and diaspora development contributions been catalyzed, and to what extent are the benefits of migration being harnessed for sustainable development? As we move towards the IMRF, I'd like to highlight 3 of these development contributions, specifically on finance, time, and skills. So the first one on finance, there needs to be more focus, a can-do attitude, and a coalition of the willing for structured support for piloting project-based diaspora financial instruments and for leveraging diaspora finance. The mobilization of diaspora finance through investment, structured funds, and other instruments are far from new in concept, but extremely limited in practice and far from reaching its potential. There are, of course, some state-led and programmatic examples to learn from. In Gambia, in Ghana, in Morocco, in Senegal, just to mention a few, all have diaspora incentive programs. In addition to state-led diaspora direct investment incentives, there are also a number of occasional and programmatic diaspora co-financing schemes operating from Europe and North America, including, for example, the Diaspora Marketplace, Meet Africa, and of course, Afford's own ABC and job creation brand, with a co-finance of 1.5 million euros from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation to support diaspora investment in Benin and Ghana, in Nigeria and Senegal over the next 4 years. There's an increasing development financing gap, even for the SDGs, of course, and these can be addressed in part through an innovative mix of concessional, blended finance, and diaspora financial capital. Nigeria's diaspora sovereign bond is one such example, which was oversubscribed by 130%, raising a total of $300 million in 2017. So in preparation for the IMRF and with a global pandemic that continues to threaten economies, it's critical that member states go beyond the pilots now, working collaboratively across and with multi-stakeholders, scaling up and incentivizing to unlock and leverage diaspora finance through more structured schemes. The second point that I want to raise is related to diaspora capital as it relates to time and skills. Key diaspora contributions are not only financial, of course, but also a combination of time and intellectual skills. And by this, I refer to diaspora volunteering in particular. Diaspora volunteering must be structured as a development intervention package. Within the diaspora sector, volunteering and related skills sharing is believed to be as significant as, if not more significant than remittances. Yet it is also the area of intervention that is the least supported. In view of the current COVID-19 pandemic, structured diaspora humanitarian volunteering would boost the continent's efforts in building up the capacity of African healthcare as well as other humanitarian systems. Most African member states have or are in the process of developing national volunteer policies. Diaspora volunteering and skills sharing must be included in this framework. And finally, I would like to touch on what I believe other civil society colleagues would already have highlighted over the last couple of days. And this is in relation to Objective 5, which civil society describes as the cornerstone of the GCM. And of course, this is on enhancing availability and flexibility of pathways for regular migration. Labor migration schemes must be migrant-centered, rights-based, and ensure triple wins, with compensation or a contribution to the institutions or country of origin that have invested in this talent. There is no doubt that such schemes that are mutually beneficial for all stakeholders, especially migrants, stand a better chance of enabling and leveraging diaspora contributions to development. Of course, this is not all down to member states. As we move towards the IMRF, let's remember that the GCM was developed to be practical and collaborative, ensuring a whole of society approach. We have opportunities to act now, and it's time that we move beyond the rhetoric. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sela. Indeed, and thank you to all the panelists for bringing those differing perspectives to the table, firstly, and secondly, for me, for making me look like an incredibly efficient, well-organized chair. I hugely appreciate you on both fronts. In the chat box, there are a number of comments coming in. I refer you to them on following up on Bella's suggestions for entry points to the IMRF, and on engaging with diaspora communities. And I now, with that, open the floor up for interventions from all those colleagues who've been listening in patiently. And I see immediately hands from the ambassador of the Philippines in Geneva and the ambassador of Portugal in Geneva. So if we could start with Ambassador Garcia, please.
Thank you, Jonathan, for giving the Philippines the floor at this time. I will try to be very brief in my comments. On the messages of WHO DDG Hakab, thank you for the reminder of how public health was once a side issue to the discussion of people on the move, a topic often neglected in the debate. The pandemic has demonstrated how human health is central to all discussions, especially on situations of mobility. Indeed, when health is at risk, everything is at risk. I wish to thank the WHO for the work on migration and health. We have been part of the core group of countries supporting the agenda item on the health of migrants and refugees in WHO, and you can count on the continued support of the Philippines when the agenda comes up again in 2023 in the WHA, or here in the discussions of the GCM, or any other fora where the discussion takes place. ASG Robert Piper noted the excellent work the UN resident coordinator Gustavo Gonzalez has been able to do in the Philippines, not just on migration and development, but on all fronts, including the joint program on human rights. The positive and collaborative engagement of Gustavo is a demonstration of what the RC system can do in ensuring a coordinated whole of UN operation at country level, and we can see it working well on the ground. I want to thank the rapporteurs for the summary records on the discussions that took place and other perspectives from the panel. Canada spoke about the Global Network on Recruitment initiative, and it takes a community initiative on narratives. The Philippines would be happy to support these as they align with our advocacies, and look forward to learning more about this, perhaps offline. We have quite an active corridor of migration between Canada and the Philippines, so there are potentially many things we can do together for the IMRF. Thanks as well, Beta Hovi, for the encouragement to engage in the webinars and the negotiations of the declaration. We are working with our mission in New York closely on this. On the lead up to the IMRF, as we have said, my delegation is ready to participate actively in the IMRF. As far as we are aware, we are all set in Capital, in Geneva, and in New York for a substantive participation. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador. I would now like to call to the floor Ambassador Macieira, the permanent representative of Portugal to the United Nations in Geneva, and put on notice that Sonia Plaza of the World Bank and Alicia Martini of the US mission in Geneva are next up.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you for the summary and the information provided. The calendar of events leading to International Migration Review Forum in May is very useful, as we also progress with preparations at a national level. As a champion country of the GCM, Portugal reiterates its commitment to contribute to a successful first IMRF and to engage actively in its preparations. The forum will be an important opportunity for member states and relevant stakeholders to share experiences on the implementation of the GCM and to reflect on the way ahead. But it will be one step further, not the end of the road. In fact, the IMRF will take place in a very particular moment of global efforts for a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the pandemic. It will therefore be a good opportunity to reflect jointly on how to address properly the constraints to human mobility and migrations and to build upon lessons learned. For even if the COVID pandemic disrupted mobility and created unprecedented challenges, it also highlighted the need for more effective migration governance and inclusive action, as well as the positive contribution from migrants. We are optimistic that this debate, focusing on challenges and lessons learned, will result in a substantive, ambitious, and forward-looking progress declaration. Above all, we hope to highlight a facts-based migration narrative that shows its tangible benefits, both in the countries of origin and destination. This has to reflect also the importance of remittances, which proved to be more resilient and dependable than expected during the pandemic. Finally, we're pleased to see that the UN Multi-Partner Trust Fund is up, running, and making good progress. Portugal has contributed to it, and we invite others to take part in these efforts. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Maciera, including for your country's support. And indeed, I should also have said that to Ambassador Garcia of the Philippines. If I can now hand the floor to Sonia Plaza of the World Bank.
Good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be in these discussions today. I am very glad to see the encouragement that Stella has made on the diaspora investments and the contribution of the diaspora. I think on for the review forum, it will be very good to take a stock on what has been achieved, what has been accomplished. But two things that it's important. One thing is, as Stella has said, let's move from pilots to really scaling up. This is the moment. They have very little pilots, some have worked, some have not worked. 4 years ago, NOMAD was trying to do an evaluation of if some of these pilots had worked or not worked. We were not able to do it because there were not many proposals that came out to do that. So at this moment, it will be important to see what has worked or not worked. Second one, in terms of the diaspora and diaspora investments, the World Bank just presented and report back to our board. And it has come out very clear in that presentation that they're encouraging that we continue moving on the diaspora bonds. So maybe we can try, as they said, Nigeria was very successful on the diaspora bond issues. What else other countries can do it? In these things, I think this is a key moment, given that countries are suffering several compounding risks, and we have to reveal back, better, and green. On this one, I think that the diaspora contributions from all the aspects, not only the investments, but trade, technology, skills, can help to bridge the gap on the lack of investments. Two areas that we can think why the diaspora cannot contribute to some of the issues of food security and agriculture. There's a huge impact that the diaspora can do in terms of this filling these gaps, especially now that food security is it has been very aggravated, but the COVID-19 price inflations are over, there are a lot of drought, and climate change is impacting a lot. And the second area that the diaspora has been contributed, but I think that they can do more, is in the area of health. In the area of health, because they have been contributing with the skills on the COVID-19, but I think that on research, especially now on the quality of vaccines, I think it will be key. My second point is on the fair recruitment. I heard the colleagues that were talking about fair recruitment. It is mentioned in the Global Compact. However, how we are going to measure if we are making progress in fair recruitment if we are not making progress in having a real data on the SDG indicator 10.7.1 on reducing the recruitment cost? I don't know what kind more discussions we're going to have in the things if we say, oh yeah, let's do for recruitment, but we have to show data to prove that really exists. The recruitment costs are exorbitant. And this has happened, now have increased, and the technical evidence has increased, and also some data. After COVID, this situation has become worse. NOMAD with the ILO are the co-custodians of the recruitment cost indicator, but I think that it's very important that we really get this data to measure those impacts. With that, I wanted to congratulate all the panelists. It has been a very active discussion, and I hope that we can have a very fair review for the Global Compact on Migration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Nice to see you. If I could now ask to the floor Alicia Martini of the US mission to the United Nations in Geneva. Alicia, please.
Hi, good afternoon all. And I want to say thank you to you, Jonathan, and to the Network on Migration for bringing us together today. We recognize the huge amount of work the UN Network on Migration is undertaking to prepare for the first International Migration Review Forum in May 2022. and we look forward to participating in the IMRF events and activities to assess implementation of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. The United States has updated our position on the Global Compact for Migration to support the Compact's vision of enhanced cooperation grounded in human rights, non-discrimination, responsibility sharing, and state sovereignty. We are currently identifying a date in the near future to publicly announce our new national statement and release that statement on the GCM. In addition, in October, the United States released our report on the impact of climate change on migration. The report is the US government's assessment and analysis of the relationship between the climate crisis and migration and displacement. It also outlines ways to improve access to protection and strengthen migration cooperation. As noted in the morning session by one of our colleagues, one of the lines of effort recommended in our climate change report, the United States will consider evaluating how to address critical gaps in development, humanitarian, and climate finance through funding toward the UN Network on Migration. The established Migration Multi-Partner Trust Fund of the UN Network on Migration, and also through other mitigation and adaptation efforts. So that is a consideration that is part of the recommendations that we included in that report. Thank you again for convening us today, and we look forward to further discussions and events leading up to the IMRF.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and including for those important updates. We look forward to engaging with you more in the months to come. I now have on the list of little virtual hands, Mr. Dongwu from UNCTAD and Mr. Andrew Rose from the mission of Australia to the United Nations in Geneva. Mr. Dongwu, if you can come to the floor.
My apologies. Actually, somebody pressed the.
It's a
mistake. Sorry.
It's an accidental virtual hand. No problem. You're welcome, though, to the meeting. So if I could now turn to Andrew Rose, please, from the mission of Australia. Andrew.
Thanks, Jonathan. And thanks, colleagues. Thank you very much for the panelists. I think the richness of the panel presentations today bodes well for the IMRF discussion and the discussions we're going to have in the lead up to it. So thank you for that. And it was particularly useful, I think, for me to gain an insight into how the UN system-wide approach to integrating migration as a cross-cutting issue, particularly at the country level through the RC. Through the RCs was really encouraging. So thank you for bringing that to the fore. Two issues that I'd like to raise. One is specific for the kind of consideration as you mull over the approach to the IMRF, and one a bit more generic or general. The specific point, it's been touched on earlier, including by the Deputy Director General at the WHO. When we think about emerging priorities, obviously the impact of COVID-19 on migrants is something that we need to continue to keep at the forefront of our consideration, but so too is the impact of COVID-19 on migration. So health policy and migration policy, we need to consider that intersection, both from the dimension of achieving public health outcomes for migrants, but also for ensuring that public health measures do not have a chilling effect on migration. And so in that regard, kind of support the call from the Director General of IOM that he kind of made at the end of IOM Council to develop a set of principles that will support member states in managing that intersection of health and migration policy, and also to carve out some time at the IMRF to continue our consideration of these important issues. Secondly, at a more general, serves two functions. The first is that it is a platform for assessing progress in terms of implementation of the GCM. But equally, I think it's important that we can see it as a platform for the whole General Assembly to come together to discuss issues of importance in terms of migration governance. And so I think if we are going to go forth on both tracks, just at a very micro level, Jonathan, when I look at the UN Network on Migration website and I'm trying to find the IMRF, I need to go searching for it underneath the GCM tab. And I would just sort of make a suggestion that perhaps it gets elevated and gets put on the banner, because that would give it the prominence that I think it deserves, alongside the multi-partner trust fund that also sits on that banner. And I think that would make it more accessible for all member states. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Good point on the website, which we will take action on. Also, I should say that in line with General Assembly conferences, we will be launching a dedicated IMRF website on the UN domain. I think quite shortly, but we should also adjust the network's website very much so. Now I'm just looking. I see John Bingham. Please, John.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I'm happy to follow Andrew Rose in Australia in underscoring how promising and how invigorating these 2 days have been for change in migration and towards the IMRF, the scope and depth and energy. Congratulations to the network and to all participants. I'm John Bingham with the NGO Committee on Migration in New York, and we're a member of the Global Civil Society Action Committee, along with Stella and Christian and a few others who have participated today and yesterday. And I wanted to join with them, as well as other participants from government and UN agencies that have underscored the centrality in the Global Compact and in migration and refugee phenomena today of regular pathways and regularization. Stella, a few minutes ago, referred to Objective 5 of the Global Compact on regular pathways, enhancing regular pathways as the cornerstone of the Global Compact. Regularization under Objective 7I, especially with respect to vulnerable migrants, but also for migrant workers, important in society, important to development, as Bella Hovey always emphasizes. But very inspired by Ecuador and Canada, underscoring the value and the practical steps in taking forward regularization. Colombia doing the same with Venezuelan migrants, with enormous support from the World Bank, has us invigorated in civil society, practical solutions, not just rhetoric on our part or anyone else's. The examples in COVID time, we know from the streets and from the towns and cities frontline with migrants and refugees worldwide, how important so many of the examples Christian referred to that were taken by states and others to regularize migrants during COVID time, to save lives of the whole community as well as of the migrants and their families. Regularization that sometimes was temporary or in work circumstances, sometimes permanent in citizenship. So France and Thailand, Australia, last week Ireland, Spain and Italy, so many, the list goes on. A few years ago, we didn't even see the word regularization figure in its own name in the Global Compact, but here it is in reality. So to sum up just the importance of regular pathways and regularization, much more possible than we thought, perhaps even a few years ago. But to put it back, put the regular back into the Global Compact on safe, orderly, and regular migration. If the Global Compact takes a 360-degree view of migration, well, regular pathways and regularization is a 360-degree phenomena in the Global Compact. It cuts across all the other areas and all the actors who come in, from local authorities to yesterday private sector, saying let's raise that up in its 360-degree value to the Global Compact. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John. Indeed. I now have Kirsten Hagen from the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Please, Kirsten, nice to see you. It's been a while.
It has, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for letting me take the floor. So for those who don't know us, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies is an international organization that strengthens and coordinates the local humanitarian action of 192 National Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies worldwide. And we provide humanitarian assistance to migrants around the world based on needs and irrespective of their status. So we really appreciate the conversation today because we see the IMRF as a very important opportunity for us to take stock of how far we've come, but also of how far we need to go. And unfortunately, as we have seen this year, in many critical areas, we still have quite a long way to go to reach the aspirations of the Global Compact on Migration and to change the lives of people on the move for the better. So the way we see it is that we have 6 months up to the IMRF to make some real progress on this, and in particular, at the national level where impact is felt. So we're really hoping that over the next 6 months, states in particular, but also other stakeholders will be reaching out to migrants in their countries and communities, to local and national organizations, including migrant-led organizations, and those who are working to provide the support to migrants and to implement the GCM, to identify some priorities for action and some milestones to achieve before the IMRF in these final 6 months. We're also hoping the IMRF itself will be an opportunity to highlight migrant voices and the voices of those who are migrants and are working directly with migrants. In this regard, it's worth flagging that the UNHCR has some 100 refugees involved in their high-level officials meeting to be held next week, with refugees often chairing the panels and a refugee speaker on every panel. And this inclusion of persons affected by the matters being discussed is really excellent. It's essential for obtaining relevant viewpoints and for credibility, and is a really strong model that we hope will be replicated at the IMRF. Now, from our side, one of the critical elements of the GCM is the commitment to save lives and ensure that all migrants, regardless of their migration status, have safe access to basic services. On our part, what we've tried to do is scale up our assistance and protection for migrants. So in 2021, we've provided safe and neutral humanitarian services to migrants through what we call humanitarian service points, some 275 of these in 42 countries. We've also scaled up our protection assistance along migratory routes, and this has included the provision of humanitarian services to migrants not only on land, but also at sea. And in 2021, we launched a new operation to provide humanitarian services on a boat in the central Mediterranean in partnership with SOS Mediterranean. So as states and other stakeholders are considering what they might want to achieve to improve in the lead up to the IMRF, we would really encourage a strong focus on ensuring that migrants are safe, that migrants are able to live with dignity, especially in the most critical times of humanitarian need. And this is how we must evaluate our success as we look at the as we look towards the IMRF. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I now see Mauro Martini from IFAD and Laurel Townhead from the Quaker offices to the UN in Geneva. Mauro.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I just wanted to take this opportunity to support what Stella and Sonia said about the investment of migrants and the contribution of migrants to their countries of origin. Indeed, migrants are keen to invest back home. They are already doing it with the means that they have at their disposal. And we have seen also that they are the first that are doing that, especially when a crisis is their countries of origin. They are just desperately looking for better, more adequate and affordable financial instruments to do it more efficiently. International organizations are doing that. There are several surveys that are proving this. We just did a survey, for instance, on the financial behavior of Malians abroad with regards to the investment back home. And there is really this need for them to find adequate financial instruments to do it efficiently. What I believe is that this is a point that should be really discussed more in depth at the International Migration Review Forum, because member states, they do have a role to play in that. The international market for such operations, financial operations, is often unregulated or fragmented. So there is a need for a more harmonized regulation on investments and financial operations, especially international financial operations and investment in foreign countries. So I really hope that there will be a room during the forum to discuss that in depth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauro. I'll hand over now to Laurel, please.
Thank you. And thank you all for what's been an interesting couple of days and for the interventions today. My name is Laurel Townhead. I'm Human Rights and Refugees Representative for the Quaker United Nations Office in Geneva. And on International Human Rights Day, as many people referred to, when the High Commissioner for Human Rights has emphasised equality at the heart of human rights, and on the day that IOM has reported a rise in deaths in migration, the persistent scale and widespread nature of violations of the rights of people in transit, coupled with the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and of COVID-19 control measures on migrants, calls for a redoubling of our efforts to deliver on the agreements in the GCM and on existing obligations under international law. We would encourage all to use this period to build towards the IMRF, these preparatory events that Bella has outlined. And we think this should provide space for multilateral dialogue that reflects on the seriousness of the situation, the urgency with which reform is needed, and which displays a shared commitment to address these new and continuing challenges in a way that upholds the dignity and rights of migrants. And we'd encourage you all to use this period, particularly to build towards the IMRF, particularly in relation to three topics I'll highlight today. One is, and I think all of them have been echoed by others already, one is participatory processes. As Monica said in her rapporteur from yesterday, how can those who manage, create and hold policy-making spaces at national level and regional and global as well, take responsibility for bringing in migrants' expertise into those spaces? And we welcome Cindy's comments on Canada's intentions on drawing on a range of expertise and echo what Kirsten just said. Our second point would be around saving lives and reflecting on what more can come from this process. Your stated determination to save lives is welcome, but it is not enough. So what more, as you explore this, what more is it that you can be doing collectively to address this problem and these tragedies that we are seeing again and again and not seeing decrease in? And the third thing I'd like to say for now is around mobility and pandemics, building from what was discussed in the IOM Council high-level segment last week and as mentioned by Andrew from the Australian mission. How can the IMRF process and that build up to it help develop, help reflect on what's been learned from the way in which COVID and COVID response measures impacted on mobility and therefore impacted on migrants and their communities? And what is it that you need to work together on to improve responses in the future? So we look forward to seeing hopefully multi-sectoral clusters to champion particular issues and to really collectively work our way through some of these complex topics in the space that we have in the IMRF and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurel. I don't see any other hands up. And there's no reason why there should be hands. That's not a indictment. I think it's been an excellent meeting. So, but I just want to give a pause to see if there are any other final interventions. If not, we can turn the floor to the Director General of IOM, Antonio Vitorino, also the coordinator of the network, say a few words and bring this third annual meeting formally to a close. Mr. Vitorino, please.
Thank you, Jonathan, and dear colleagues. It is my great pleasure to say just a few words. I promise it's a few words. On Friday afternoon, it should also always be few words at the end of this third annual meeting of our network. We meet on a day packed with significance. The third anniversary of the adoption of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. And exactly 5 months out from the Compact's first global review. And as we commemorate our collective belief in the universality and fundamental importance of our human rights, this last reminds us that whether discussing international migration or any other collective endeavor, there is no more important calling than upholding and reinforcing the rights of all. Today's news from Mexico one of many heartbreaking episodes too often witnessed the world over, provides this point with a tragic illumination. Over these 2 days, we have had the chance to take stock of how far we have come as a network. I am proud of our achievements and grateful for the recognition received, including during last week's IOM Council. Great strides have been made in bringing the system together, in supporting our member states, and ensuring a platform for the meaningful engagement and inclusion of all stakeholders. We have built, I believe, the basis for future growth, grounded in a commitment to adapt where necessary, to learn from each other, and to strengthen communications at all levels between all partners. I thank you all for your support in what has been, indeed, a collective achievement. As this year winds down, we must now look ahead to the challenges of next year. As everybody recognizes, the first IMRF in May constitutes an important moment to take stock of the state of implementation of the Global Compact, but it also in parallel provides us with the forum in which to come together again under the auspices of the United Nations General Assembly to discuss collective approaches to collective goals. As such, it is, I believe, a powerful tool for multilateralism. The forum presents us with an opportunity to discuss the challenges we face in realizing the pursuit of safe, orderly, and regular migration, grounded in the full spectrum of that phrase, committed, in other words, to its 360-degree realization. But it also presents us with an opportunity to identify and discuss approaches to the most pressing issues on our agenda. The past 2 years have shown us, with shuddering power, just how fragile our systems of global mobility are. The seismic disruptions to migration and the impacts these have had on the lives of so many demand we ask what lessons we can learn for the future to better insulate ourselves from future shocks that there will occur, to better protect migrants, and to better erase the stains of exclusion and inequality that we see too often in our societies and that have been exacerbated by the pandemic. The forum provides an opportunity for just such discussions. In my recent conversation with the President of the General Assembly, he made clear the priority was according to the IMRF during his presidency. I assured him of the total commitment of the network in supporting him in this endeavor. In that regard, I would like to leave you with 4 ideas as to how we can work together to make the forum the success we will want for it. First, let us commit to a forum that is truly global and truly inclusive. A forum in which the whole of government and all of society guiding principles shine through. A forum which is open to and benefits from the active involvement of all states from all regions. And a forum committed to the sharing of experiences and, of course, to further cooperative action. I am confident that we can deliver on this. And I'm grateful to the commitment of so many states to the joint exercise, whether GCM champions, MPTF donors, or those many others who contribute ideas and support at national, at regional, and global levels. To all of you, my thanks. Second, let us commit to using the months before May to increase our understanding of the challenges ahead and to refine our understanding of what we want out of the forum for the future. Indeed, the forum is both an end point of this first phase in the life of the Global Compact, but also vitally a launch pad for the next phase. We must come away from this gathering in May with a clear sense of purpose and of direction. The network will be supporting a busy calendar of discussions in preparation for the roundtables and for the policy dialogue, and to launch the Secretary General's report in February, designed to inform the forum's discussions, bring all partners together, and ensure we don't enter May from a standing start. Your active engagement in these discussions will be vital. Third, let us use all the tools at our disposal. In particular, I would like to highlight the importance, potential, and still to be realized of the Compact's capacity building mechanism. The fund, as we have seen, has made great strides. It is now operational, it brings the system together, its methods guarantee inclusivity and alignment with national priorities. It is the embodiment of a commitment to cooperation. And through it, we can realize in the most visible of ways the aspirations of the Global Compact, including, as we discussed in this morning's consultative forum, in how we can address the evolving relationship between climate change and migration, reinforcing the fund's capital base so that we can emerge from the forum with a fund poised to launch many more programs of support. I think this must be a priority. But so too must be bringing further to life the Migration Network Hub, comprising the Global Knowledge Platform and the Connection Hub. These two represents our commitment to cooperation, to mutual learning, to the sharing of ideas. I call on all of us to make the hub the vital tool its architects, you, the member states, called for it to be. Finally, as we have trailed in a number of recent conversations, the network, with the endorsement of the President of the General Assembly, will mark International Migrants Day next week by launching a GCM pledging initiative. More guidance on this will be coming soon. But in essence, we will be asking all partners, member states, stakeholders, and the UN system to reflect on what more they can do in ways that are concrete, new, and measurable to further the implementation of the Global Compact. We hope through this initiative to further reinforce the cooperative underpinnings of the Compact, to further build momentum towards an IMRF that generates tangible outcomes, and to provide the most visible demonstration of our commitment truly to leave no one behind. Let me now bring this annual meeting to a close with my thanks for your unfailing support during this demanding year, my optimism for what we can achieve in the coming year, and with the three words, that you will be hearing from me, and I hope from the network, more and more often. Make a pledge. Make a pledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General Vitorino. I can't think of anything to add to that. I usually have lots of things to say, but I think that was an excellent way to bring an end to the network's year. We will not be leaving you alone. We will be spamming your email inboxes. I hope you find this spamming to be useful. We will be taking a small pause during the holiday season, but back with vigor and enthusiasm in the new year. And I just wish to add my thanks to those of the Director Generals, to all of your support in bringing us to where we are now. It's an exciting time. In the meantime, be safe, be well, have a restful weekend, and we look forward to re-engaging in the coming days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.